Okay,
Okay,
well, we are at the just gone past the top of the hour, in fact. So welcome on board, everybody. Welcome, and it seems like hopefully we have Nozipho online and audible and visible. So that's fantastic. So I think Lee, we'll probably just dive straight into it if that's okay with you.
Where's Lee?
Yeah, where's Lee? Lee, are you with us?
I was giving a thumbs up and don't need on Nozipho. Looking forward to the story.
Okay.
Great, Nozipho there.
Okay, great. Morning, everyone. I'm going to start this afresh and just move straight from the beginning. I'm a second born of 4 children between my mother and my father. They were both originally from Ladysmith, and that's where they met. And even though they were from Ladysmith, they moved around a lot because when my parents had their first 2 kids, which is me and my sister, they were staying in the northern KwaZulu-Natal at that time, which is Ulundi. And so we stayed with my grandfather and grandmother, and were raised by my grandmother and grandfather. My grandfather was not a man of many words, short-tempered. And one of my fondest memories of him was how one day my sister and I had to, I think we were doing grade 1. It was called the first year at that time. And they were teaching us to write, to make alphabets, to write alphabets. So we were given the homework to get mud and mold it into S shapes. And my sister and I both forgot. And in the morning, as we're getting ready to go to school, just as we're leaving the house, then we remember. And of course, my grandfather wasn't pleased. And that day, he didn't even walk us to school because he used to walk us to school every morning. We're doing grade 1. So now grandfather is mad, and we're going to get to school and have to explain this to the teacher as well. But my sister and I went to school. And then I remember hearing his voice. So obviously during break, we're sitting trying to find something that we could shape into S's, my sister and I, but we couldn't find anything. And the next thing I remember hearing his voice at the background in class, and he walks in and he's carrying this whole tray of S-shaped cookies. So him and my grandmother went home and they baked cookies into S shapes and they brought it to the class. I can't explain to you how that must have felt. And at this time, everybody in class suddenly had these cookies. The teacher was happy. So that's my fondest memory of him. He passed away a couple of years later from cancer. My grandmother was a very strong Christian woman. Raised us with those strong Christian principles. She used to be a domestic worker. She worked for the Kenyan family. Beautiful people. They used to, I remember very well when she spoke about them all the time. They used to stay in Bryanston, and they loved her. They really, really adored her, such that when my father started working, he then sort of forced her to stop working, and she had to come home and now raise me and my sister. And even after that, they used to come at least once a year and visit. And every time they came, they would come with these bales of clothing. And, when the Kenyans came, it was an event because, it would be like Jesus himself is coming. Like, we'd have to prepare a whole week prior. My grandmother wanted everything to be to the T. One of his agreements with my father when he wanted her to leave, to come raise us, was that he was going to buy her a dining room table because, she had become used to the Kenyans' way of life, and she really raised us encompassing what she had learned there with what she knew, and that's how she raised my sister and I. And so the table would have to be prepared every Sunday. That's just what she had learned from the Kenyans, that every Sunday you must have a proper 7-color dinner on the table, and that's how she wanted it. But also taught us a lot of domestic work. Like, you know, she was raising us, if anything, to be someone's wife. So there's nothing I can't do domestically, from going to get water in the well, to going to get log for the fire, to chasing the chicken, which must be made into lunch the next day, like cleaning the house, literally everything. And so, you know, when the Kenyans would come, at least once a year, they would bring these bales of clothing. And my sister and I obviously had the first choice before she gives this out to the community. And one of the things we had from those bales was we had the swimming costumes. Now, remember, we were staying in a farm, in a small town, very rural. And there were no swimming pools there. So we had the swimming costumes. And what my grandmother used to do was that every time it rained, she would then put my sister and I on these 2 swimming costumes. They were matching exactly the same. My sister and I were raised like twins because we were just a year apart. And we'd go around in the rain and be jumping and singing, because this was the only chance we had to wear swimming costumes. So she really, really tried everything she could to make sure we had a happy childhood. Now, my grandmother was also what she also did, I think she learned it from the Kenyans, that, you know, kids must go to crèche that were our age. So she got one of the teachers from the community that was retired to come to our house every morning and sit and really take my sister and I through what's supposed to be crèche. And as that progressed, then, you know, other neighbors started bringing their children as well, and it grew, and then she started looking for funding. And she was the person that built the first crèche in the area, which was amazing. And she loved doing things to build the community, because she had been exposed to the Joburg way of life. So whatever she had seen there, she wanted to bring back into the rural where we were. She was also very entrepreneurial in that she sold everything from peanuts to Coca-Cola to spreaders. I don't even know what that is in English. To paraffin, because there was no electricity where we stayed, to candles, to, you know, everything people needed. They would come to the house and they'd buy, and we'd give them change. And, you know, very entrepreneurial in that sense. My sister and I you would get tag money. Instead of tag money, what she would do is the night before, we'd have to package the peanuts that we'd sell at school the next day. I think they were like 10 cents or something. And we'd package 6 each to take to school. And so all she wanted was the 50 cents from the 5. It was up to you what you do with the 6, whether you sell it and you take the 10 cents to buy yourself whatever you want, or whether you have those peanuts as a snack. That's how she raised us. Like, instead of giving us tag money, that's how she worked around it. My father then moved us from Ladysmith when we were doing, it was called Standard 4. When my father to Durban, he then came to get my sister and I, because him and my mom were staying with both my brothers. So my father came to take my sister and I, and we moved to Durban. We started at H Township, and then we moved to AA Township. And when he first came to take us, he'd just gotten a promotion, and he'd just become a lecturer, and had been moved from Durban, from Ulundi to Durban. He moved us from Ulundi to Durban. My mother didn't have her transfer at that time. So how it turned out is it was just my father with the kids, while my mother was still waiting to get her transfer sorted. And he was very strict. He was an academic. And so everything to do with education had to be to the T. And because he was a lecturer, half the teachers at our school were his students. So, you know, he would go there and he would get your academic behavior, how you're doing. And, you know, by the time he gets home at any given stage, he knows how you're doing. And if you need to get a hiding, you would get it as soon as he walks in the door. We were not allowed to get 80%. You know, you would go home very excited that you got 8 out of 10. And, you know, my father would want to know what happened to the other 2. Why didn't you get 10 out of 10? And that's really how he raised us. And, you know, never bought us toys. If anything, bought us encyclopedias. You know, those big encyclopedia books. That's what you know, I remember boxes of those coming home every time. So we raised around a lot of books where my father was concerned, but also a very humble man. I got along very well with absolutely everyone, from, you know, people that did guidance, got along with everyone because he come from a very poor background. So he understood everything. And, you know, what he also did after my mother then came to join us, we then moved to when they opened up to say Black people could now go stay in the suburban areas, we first moved to Umbilo. My father moved us there, got a place, then moved us there. One of the things I could never reconcile when we moved there was how it was very close to an area called Dalton, the hostel. My father every weekend would go down to Dalton and sit there with the people that stayed at the hotel and just be one with them. And, you know, I would never reconcile how my father is such an influential man, you know, in his profession. And yet, you know, you would find him sitting and having a conversation with absolutely everybody. But that's just how he was. And one of the things he had wanted out of all of us was, you know, the absolute minimum was, it always said each person in here must have a master's degree. That's just what he wanted. And, you know, one time he then, when he moved us into white schools, we moved to Durban Girls High School, my sister and I. And I remember being so worried after our first test because of the difference in the education where we were to the new schools where we were. So our marks really, really dropped. So, you know, when you're used to being number one or number two, and that's another thing, because my sister and I were always in the same class, one would have to be number one and the other would have to be number two, or he would settle for a tie between the two of us. But the minute there's somebody in between us, if number two belonged to some other kid, you know, we'd explain, we'd really explain, and it's not just explaining, we'd actually get a hiding for that. Now, when my father then moved us into Durban Girls High School, but, you know, the nice part of it was because he was in the education sector, he understood the differences within education, because while we were worried that now our marks have dropped, what are we going to say to Daddy? He actually sat us down and he said, that's what he taught us, to say, listen, there's a difference in terms of the education that you are getting and the education you are in now, so don't stress yourself. It was amazing. One morning, he just wasn't able to take us to school. And so my sister and I took a bus to school. And when we came back, he had been hospitalized. And I remember what I used to do while he was hospitalized was I would sit and write every day, just write down who came to visit him, because he was really loved by a lot of people. So he had everybody coming to visit him at the hospital. One of the things my father used to do with us was, whenever he comes home, loved his beer. Whenever he come home, there'd have to be his 2 quarts of beer there. But he was also a writer. So he would take his beers and he would stay up right through the night and maybe sleep at about 3. But he needed to make sure that his beers and his Craven A's were there. Now, what he would also do is he would say, Studla, that's what he called me, I was very fat. It says, Studla, tell me what you did from the time you woke up in the morning until now. And, you know, you'd have to take him through that. So in my mind, I thought when he comes out of hospital, I'd have to tell him what happened from the time he left until now. So every day I would write down who was coming to visit and what was happening. But, you know, he never came back. He passed away after that. And at the time when he passed away, I was about 14. My sister must have been 15. The boys were even younger. And then my mother had to raise us by herself. And it was tough on her because, you know, she'd always had this cushion. Firstly, she'd had us raised by grandmother, and then she had us raised by dad. And then suddenly everything rested on her. Really, really tried her best. She was a nurse, and so she was more your comforter. But, you know, she struggled. I remember her breaking down a lot of times after my father's passing. But she tried, and we continued at Durban Girls High, and we matriculated. I was very naughty at Durban Girls High. I think I was trying to process that whole thing of the death of my father and this whole new, you know, so I was very naughty. I remember my sister and I were in the same class, and she was a prefect. And I was just, you know, those naughty girls that were always called on the intercom to come down to the office. And that was just my life. And I really didn't see anything wrong with that. But there was, now that I'm old, I realize. After passing matric, one of the ways I celebrated matric was in doing things that led to me being pregnant with my daughter. And remember, I had started school a bit earlier because I was raised like a twin with my sister. So I was much younger when I finished matric, and I fell pregnant, and now I had to go to university, and I was pregnant. And my mom found out, and it tore her apart. And you can imagine what it did to me. Like, it tore her apart, because she kept on saying, maybe if your dad was here, this would not have happened. And but she was not going to let me skip school and look after my daughter. So she says, go to school, go stay at rest, finish your education, and then you're going to then take care of your child. In the meantime, she took care of my daughter. And as a result, they're very, very close, my daughter and my mom. Then at UKZN, I made a lot of beautiful friendships. Probably most of the friendships I've retained up to now were the ones made at UKZN. That's how I met my beautiful friend Mpho. And after UKZN was another naughty run. And remember, at this time, I'm a teenage mom. I'm still reconciling the death of my father. I have a daughter that stays at home with my mother. I'm just, I don't know what space I was in, but, had a lot of fun while trying to process myself and my life. After a while, there was not a lot of, I wasn't serious with my studies when I was at UKZN. And, I remember there would be times where I just wouldn't go to class. I'd sit outside cafeteria and watch people go to class. But, sometimes when you know that you are capable intellectually, it can sort of mess you up, because in my mind, I would wait for them to come out from class, and then I'd ask them to borrow me their books, and I'd make copies and just teach myself in class, because in my mind, I was thinking I'll be able to catch up. But anyway, by the time I left UKZN, I hadn't finished my degree because of my ways. And I was also bored at the time. I remember on my last year at UKZN, I got a job, a part-time job at a company called Academy for Mathematics. And when one of the ladies there was tasked with going to open a branch in Port Elizabeth, she asked me if I wanted to come with her, and I jumped on board and went with her to Port Elizabeth. She was a Muslim lady, and I spent my first month staying with her and her family. And it was just very interesting to watch their way of life, because I'd never stayed with anyone outside of my race. And here I was for 4 months staying with Fatima and her family. But they were lovely people. I learned stuff from them. On the second month, I then moved into my place and in Port Elizabeth. Remember, at this time, I was about 20. And, I'm 20, I now have my own flat, and, with the view of the sea. I was staying in Summerstrand, and, I was happening. But, all of my friends were in Joburg. And, every time I spoke to them, whilst I had everything here, every time I spoke to them, I thought, no, man, life is passing me by. The people are in Joburg. So regardless of what I was accumulating here, it just didn't mean as much, because I wasn't having fun. There was no one my age that I was hanging around with. In PE, my friend was like 32. I was 20. So one morning I just woke up and packed my bags. I was staying in a fully furnished flat. I called the landlord. I said, listen, it's been amazing. It's been great. I gotta go. I called my boss. I said, listen, I'm going. I'm not coming back. It was Easter's. And she's like, no, it's fine. I will make sure that you join our Joburg branch, which she facilitated, and that was great. Joined the Joburg branch for a few months. I didn't like it. I then started working for Franklin Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that's where I got exposed to training, because, I loved what it is that they were training, because, I remember there was this lady, this white lady, she was so beautiful, and she was the trainer, and I was the product consultant. So I was the one to train people, and then the people would come to the warehouse to look for the products which were related to the 7 habits of highly effective people. So she would train the people and then hand them over to me. But, she made training look like such a beautiful thing. And, everyone that came would just be singing praises of what she does in training. And I thought, I want to train too. but I never got around to going with her to her trainings and seeing what she does, because the product room was always busy. I left Franklin Covey and went to work for Cousins recruitment agencies. I worked for a lady called Ladra Cousins. She was Rhodesian. She was Rhodesian, and you know, we were all scared of her. Like, she shouted, and you know, but somehow she was those women that, you know, that there's a movie, The Devil Wears Prada. She was one of those women, like not a hair out of place, just totally beautiful, very rich, very moneyed. And she loved me though, because I remember at some stage when I left, when I told her I was leaving, she called me to her office, opened this bottle of wine, and, you know, was telling me about how we can partner into this, you know, and but I wasn't hearing it. I was young, and Mpo had introduced me to BAT. I'd gone to an interview, they loved me. I wanted that life, I wanted to be in entertainment. So I left recruitment and went into BAT. Now, had a great time. I was in the entertainment industry. I was in the FMCG. It was just, you know, it was amazing. And I remember Ladra, when I was leaving, she kept saying, "What are you going there for? Just because they're giving you a company car? I'll take you tomorrow to a dealership, Nozipho, and get your company car. Stay, don't go." But I was thinking, nah, I'm too scared of you. It's not gonna work. Let me go have fun somewhere else. And that's how I went to BAT. Had a lot of fun at BAT. And during that time, I met a guy, and he was also in the entertainment industry, and he later became the father of my son. Our relationship didn't last long though. He continued to be a beautiful father to his son, and you know, we get along. We didn't work as a couple, but he works as a parent and I work as a parent, so we make that part work. Just after I gave birth to my son, I had a near-death experience, and I developed something called thrombosis. I remember one time I was driving down Republic Road in Randburg, and my entire left-hand side just froze. I suddenly couldn't continue driving. Like, I had to steer the car with the right hand to try and park on the side and call people to come help. And went into ER, and then they told me I had thrombosis, and it was the scariest thing, because, you know, the doctor was saying he doesn't know how much time I have to live, because, you know, this thing is an instant killer. Anything can happen at any minute. And I remember calling my mom when I realized this was really serious, because my mom was in the medical field. She was a nurse. And I called her and I said, "This is what they say I have." And she literally left work at that moment and came straight to Joburg. And then I knew that, okay, this is bad. And, you know, I would go through radiotherapies where I'd have to lie on these things, and they'd put me inside machines. I'd have to inject myself every single day. You know, I lived on injecting myself because the blood would be too thin. I'd inject myself to thin the blood, then it would be too thin. And then, you know, it was a mess. And I'm a new mom. I can't touch the baby because I've just had this radiotherapy. And, you know, you'd go to see a doctor, and, you know, in the waiting room there's just Bibles, and I was like, okay, this means I'm really on my way. So that part of it was scary, until the one morning this friend of mine came in and she says, "Come, let's go to church." And we went to church, and they prayed for me. Like, I would wake up and they would pray for me, and I would lie down. Like, that process must have taken a good 30 minutes. But literally after that, I never ever used those needles of injecting myself again, never got to use them again. And that's how I got to experience God as the healer in my life, because I saw it happen. I was Q2, I was almost gone. I remember I used to just sit and just pray for my children, because I'd say, "Dear God, I have 2 children. What's going to happen?" And then I went back to work. I was at BAT. I went back to work at the time. And not too long after that, though, I then decided to go back to Durban. I think the death scare must have been too much for me. So I moved back to Durban. And moved back home to mom. In fact, we'd gone there for December, my sister and I, because we used to stay together. And when it was time to leave, like around the 2nd of Jan, she wakes me up, she says, can we leave at say about 9? I'm like, no, you know what? I'm gonna be here for another 2 weeks and see if I can get a job. If I get a job, then I'm not coming back. And luckily I did get a job at Kelly. And after the job at Kelly, I then started my very first business, which was Zamogutle Projects. And I started that in partnership with 2 other people. So there was 3 of us that were in partnership at Zamogutle. And it went well. Like, it was my first business. I was winning, things were looking good. I remember I went on a trade mission to the Middle East. I went to 5 different countries and showcasing our businesses. I was young. I was like 26, I think. And I was winning. Business was good and everything was good. And I was happy like that. And soon after that, I started doing an MBA. And then I went through the stress of having to juggle the studies with, I was a single mom, and my kids and I were staying, we were in Kloof at that time before we left. And, I was a single mom, so I'd have to leave the office at about 3, rush home, pick up the kids from school, make them dinner, do some homework, and rush to class because our classes started at 6, and make sure everything is done in class. It was a mess. Like, that entire 2-year period was a mess. And a lot of things fell by the wayside while trying to balance all of that. And one of the things that happened, there was the business partnership also went south. It was also around the time where trade unions had come up with that thing of saying employment agencies are not, I don't know, but it was something to do with saying people must rather be employed permanently instead of having them go through employment agencies. And that was another stressor on the business. And the business eventually went down. And when that business went down, I quickly then opened my own business, which is Asmon Nimrod Consulting. I was just explaining to Trevor and Ivan earlier that it's named after my 2 grandfathers, Asmon and Nimrod. I started my own business at that time and, just moved right along and decided I was in recruitment in the first business. But one of the things I picked up in days, I was already picking up how, you'd sit with at least 5,000 CVs, maybe 500 CVs, responses. And a client would not be interested in any one of those. So I realized there was a gap somewhere in between. And then I started going into career guidance at that time because I figured something had to be done to prepare the people with CVs without employment to get them to be able to be employable. So I then went into career guidance. I wrote a book at that time called Manual of a Job Seeker. The book it struggled to pick up. I was trying to get into schools, to get the program into schools as well. I struggled with that. I struggled a lot with that, and in busy trying to pick up the book, and then the business sort of took a huge knock at that time. And one of the things that then happened was prior to that, I'd gone to London when I wanted to understand how career guidance worked because we didn't have it here. So I didn't have anything to base it on. I couldn't learn career guidance anywhere. So I went to London and I spent about 2 weeks there by myself. I was always so brave, I'll just up and go. So I spent 2 weeks there by myself. There was also a career guidance conference. I had coincided my 2-week stay with that. And it made appointments, got there, just really asking people to help me understand how this works. And then I came back. And when the book struggled to pick up and the business took a knock after that, I again had to move back home. I remember having to sit and make a decision. What do I do? I first got rid of the one car I took at that time. And because in my mind, you know, when your business is going down, you can see it going down, and then you're thinking, we'll probably pick up in another 3 months. So I sold the one car, and I thought, right, this should keep us afloat for the next 3 months, but then the business would have picked up. Business didn't pick up. Then I had to make a decision, okay, what do I do next? Do I sell another car now? But that was the only car we had left. Or do I get rid of the house? And the option was get rid of the house. You still need the car to get more business. So I then left, I took the kids, and we moved with my mom back home. And while I was there, I continued working on the business. One of the things that had always happened is whenever the business went down, you know, everybody around you will always tell you how, you know, go get a job, CV, this, that. But I knew without a shadow of a doubt at all those times that the only thing I want to do is to either revive this business or to start a new business. There was never a question of going and finding a job. That was just, there was no two ways about that. And so I started picking up again. One of the things I did is I approached an organization called One Voice South Africa. And now it was easier to approach things without rushing them, because now I was at home and I was thinking clearer. I was now no longer stressing. So I approached this organization called One Voice South Africa, and I tell them that because you guys are already at schools, they were doing HIV, AIDS, and TB education at schools. And I told them I'm struggling to get into schools, and yet I have a program that I feel must go into schools. Seeing as you guys are already at schools, why don't we partner and you guys can introduce this program into schools? They welcomed me with open arms and were excited. So I then took portions of that book and created a program, a career guidance program for schools. And that worked beautifully. I mean, it's still going now. It's reached over 6,000 students in KZN. Recently, the American Embassy has just come on board, so that went beautifully. But I wasn't making money out of that process. And I'm a business person, I needed to make money. So I had to continue hustling to find something that was going to make money. My time, what do I do?
So Nozipho, we're now in the swing of it. We completely get that it's a 2-part series. So, we'll blame Mpumelelo. But I think you halfway, that's what I'm reckoning, and it just would be so lovely if we could continue tomorrow. Would that be all right?
That'll be fine. I'll be fine with it.
Thank you. It's just rich with, you know, memories and the way you describe the people that you interact with, and the twists and turns. We just really appreciating your sharing, and it's enriching our lives. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to part 2 tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thanks, everyone. Fantastic story so far, Nozipho. We're really looking forward to the second episode, and yeah, I'd love to see you all tomorrow. So go well, have a great day, stay warm, and we'll chat. Cheers then.